People in the Middle Ages drank a lot of beer. This is not a surprise, water was often unsafe. Beer was a source of calories. It was a part of daily life for almost everyone, but the beer they drank was not the beer we drink today. It was different in many ways. It was often thick, cloudy, and made with a mix of grains. And most importantly, it often didn't contain hops. Before hops became the standard, brewers used a mix of herbs and spices to flavor and preserve their beer. This mixture was called Groot. Groot was different from place to place. Each region had its own recipe. It might contain bog myrtle, yarrow, or wild rosemary. This made for a huge variety of local beers with unique flavors. It was a world of beer that we have mostly lost, but in this world, one beer stood out. It was not just a local drink, it was an international brand. It came from a specific city. And it was known everywhere for its strength, its strange taste, and its supposed health benefits. This beer was called Mumm. Mumm came from the city of Brunswick in what is now Germany. It first appears in records around the 15th century. It wasn't a simple brew beer. It was something more. It was a carefully crafted product. It was a thick, dark, and incredibly strong brew. Its recipe was a closely guarded secret. It contained not just grains, but a long and strange list of herbs, barks, and other ingredients. When people in England or the Netherlands or Scandinavia heard the name Mumm, they knew what they were getting. They were getting Brunswick Mumm. It was an export, a luxury good. It was shipped in heavy wooden barrels across the North Sea. Drinking Mumm was a statement. It meant you had money. It meant you had a taste for something powerful and different. The name itself, Mumm, is a bit of a mystery. Some think it comes from the Latin word optimum, meaning the best. Others think it might relate to the idea of being silent or mum after drinking it, perhaps because it was so strong it left you speechless. No one knows for sure, but the name stuck. Mumm was more than just a strong drink. It was considered medicine. People drank it to cure all sorts of ailments. The herbs inside were chosen for their medicinal properties. It was a kind of tonic. It was a health drink that also happened to get you very, very drunk. This combination of pleasure and supposed wellness was a powerful marketing tool, even back then. So Mumm was a beer, but it was also a legend. It was a product of a specific time and place. A time before beer was standardized. A time when a city could build its fortune on a secret recipe for a dark herbal brew. To understand Mumm is to understand a different world of flavor, trade, and belief. It was a beer that defined an era for a city and became famous across Northern Europe. And it all started with its strange, complicated recipe. So what was actually in Mumm? This is the central question. The recipe was the source of its fame and its mystery. While the exact formula was a trade secret in Brunswick, several recipes were written down over the centuries. They give us a good idea of what made this drink so unique. It was nothing like a modern beer. First, let's look at the grains. A modern beer is usually made from malted barley. Mumm was different. The base was made from wheat malt. A lot of it. This would have given the beer a thick, bready, and sweet body. But it wasn't just wheat. Recipes also call for oat malt and ground beans, like fava beans or peas. This is already very strange to us. The beans would have added protein, making the beer even thicker and giving it a unique, earthy flavor. The combination of wheat, oats, and beans created a rich, soupy liquid that was the foundation of Mumm. This mixture of grains, called the mash, was then boiled, and it was boiled for a very long time. Some recipes say 5 or 6 hours. This long boil would have caramelized the sugars in the malt, making the beer dark brown or even black. It would have also concentrated the liquid, making it incredibly thick and sweet, almost like a syrup. This was not a light, refreshing drink. It was a meal in a mug. Now we get to the heart of Mumm the herbs. This is where it leaves normal beer behind. The list of ingredients reads like something from an apothecary's shop, not a brewery. One of the most important herbs was poley mountain, a type of germander. It has a bitter, aromatic quality. Another key ingredient was betony, a plant from the mint family that was highly valued in medieval medicine. It was thought to cure everything from headaches to anxiety. The list goes on. Marjoram and thyme were added, giving it a warm, savory, almost culinary spice flavor. Then came blessed thistle, also known as Carduus benedictus. This was another major medicinal herb of the time, used for digestion and to fight fevers. Its name literally means blessed thistle. Its inclusion reinforced Mumm's status as a health tonic. And the list gets even weirder. Some recipes call for the tops of fir trees and birch trees. This would have added a piney, resinous flavor, a bit like gin. Other ingredients mentioned include walnuts, rose petals, and even cardamom. One particularly strange addition found in some English recipes trying to copy the Brunswick original was civet. Civet is a glandular secretion from a cat-like animal. It was used in perfumery for its strong, musky scent. It's hard to imagine what that would taste like in a beer. To make things even more unusual, some accounts mention adding uncooked eggs into the barrel during fermentation. The idea was that the eggs would be consumed by the yeast, adding nutrients and making the fermentation stronger. Whether this was common practice or just a brewer's tale is hard to say, but it adds to the strange picture of Mum's creation. After the long boil with all these herbs, the thick, sweet liquid was cooled and fermented. The fermentation was likely done with a mix of wild and domesticated yeasts. Because of the huge amount of sugar in the liquid, the final beer would have been very high in alcohol. Estimates place it anywhere from 7% to over 10% alcohol by volume. In an era when most daily beer was weak, this was incredibly potent. So you have a thick, dark, sweet base made from wheat, oats, and beans. You boil it for hours until it's like syrup. Then you infuse it with a complex and bitter mix of medicinal herbs, pine needles, and spices. The result is Mum. It was not just a drink, it was a concoction, a powerful, strange, and unforgettable brew that tasted of nothing else on earth. Imagining the taste of Mum is a challenge. We have the ingredient list, but we don't have the drink itself. Our modern palates are used to the clean, bitter taste of hops. Mum was from a completely different sensory world. We can, however, make some educated guesses about what it was like to sit down and drink a mug of it in the 16th century. First, the appearance. Mum was a dark beer. The long boil of the wheat-heavy wort would have created a deep brown, almost black color. It would not have been clear. It was likely opaque and murky, full of suspended yeast and proteins from the wheat and beans. When poured, it would have been thick, moving slowly in the mug. It probably had a low level of carbonation, making it relatively still, not fizzy like a modern lager. Then, the smell. The aroma would have been complex and probably overwhelming. The sweetness of the malt would be the first note, a smell of dark bread and caramel. But on top of that would be the cloud of herbs. The piney scent of fir tips, the savory smell of thyme and marjoram, and the bitter, medicinal aroma of blessed thistle and betony. It would not have smelled like any beer we know today. It might have smelled more like a medieval cough syrup or a herbal liqueur. The first sip would have been a shock. The texture would be the first thing you'd notice. It would be thick, viscous, and syrupy on the tongue, almost chewy. This was not a drink you could gulp down on a hot day. It was a substantial, heavy liquid that demanded to be sipped slowly. The flavor would be a battle between sweet and bitter. The huge amount of malted wheat in the long boil created a powerful, unfermented sweetness. It would taste of toffee, molasses, and dark fruit. But fighting against that sweetness would be the intense bitterness of the herbs. Poley Mountain and blessed thistle are very bitter plants. This wasn't the clean, crisp bitterness of hops. It was a complex, earthy, medicinal bitterness that would linger in the mouth. Alongside the sweet and bitter, there would be a symphony of other flavors. The savory, almost meaty notes from the marjoram and thyme. The sharp, resinous taste of the fir tips. The subtle floral hints from any rose petals. It would be a confusing, chaotic, and powerful taste experience. For a modern drinker, it would probably be unpleasant at first. It was a taste you had to acquire. And then there was the effect. Mum was strong. The high alcohol content would have made itself known quickly. It would produce a strong warming sensation as it went down. This warmth, combined with the complex herbal flavors, is likely why it was considered a medicine. It felt like it was doing something to you. It felt potent. People didn't drink Mum to quench their thirst. They drank it for its power. They drank it in small amounts, like one might drink a strong wine or a brandy today. It was a winter drink, a fireside drink. It was also a social drink for those who could afford it. To share a jug of Mum was to share an experience. The belief that it was healthy was a huge part of the experience. A person drinking Mum would not just be tasting the herbs, they would be thinking about the good those herbs were doing for their body. They believed the betony was calming their nerves, that the blessed thistle was settling their stomach. This psychological effect is crucial. It transformed the strange, bitter taste from a flaw into a feature. It was the taste of medicine. It was the taste of health. So, Mum was likely a thick, sweet, and intensely bitter herbal beer. It was strong, warming, and designed to be sipped. It was an acquired taste, but one that promised not just intoxication, but well-being. It was a complete sensory experience, a window into a time when the line between food, drink, and medicine was very blurry indeed. Mumm was not just a local curiosity, it was big business. The story of Mumm is also the story of the city of Brunswick and its place in the world of medieval and early modern trade. For a few centuries, Brunswick Mumm was one of the most famous and sought after beers in all of Northern Europe. Brunswick was the perfect place for a beer like Mumm to be born and to thrive. It was a major city in the Hanseatic League, a powerful confederation of merchant guilds and market towns that dominated trade along the coasts of Northern Europe. Brunswick was not on the coast, but it was a vital inland hub. It had the wealth, the connections, and the brewing expertise to create a high quality, consistent product. The brewers of Brunswick treated Mumm not just as a beer, but as a brand. They understood that its reputation was everything. The city council created strict regulations to control the production of Mumm. These rules dictated the ingredients, the brewing process, and the quality of the final product. Only certified brewers were allowed to make it. This was an early form of quality control and brand protection. When a barrel was stamped with the seal of Brunswick, a customer in London or Amsterdam knew they were getting the real thing. This consistency was key to its success. In an age of inconsistent local brews, Mumm was reliable. It always tasted the same, it was always strong. This made it a valuable commodity. Merchants could buy and sell it with confidence. The logistics of the Mumm trade were impressive. The heavy beer was brewed and put into sturdy oak barrels. These barrels were then transported overland to the great port cities of Hamburg and Lubeck. From there, they were loaded onto Hanseatic cogs, the workhorse ships of the League. These ships sailed across the North Sea and the Baltic Sea, carrying their precious cargo to foreign markets. England was one of the biggest markets for Mumm. It was imported in huge quantities. The English called it Brunswick Mumm, and it developed a reputation as a powerful restorative drink. It was more expensive than local English ales, so it was consumed by the wealthy. It appears in literature and in personal diaries of the time. People wrote about its strength and its strange medicinal taste. It became fashionable. Taverns in London would proudly advertise that they had genuine Brunswick Mumm on tap. The Netherlands was another major consumer. As a nation of traders and sailors, they had a taste for strong, durable beers that could survive long sea voyages. Mumm fit the bill perfectly. It was so popular that Dutch brewers started to make their own versions, though these were considered inferior to the original from Brunswick. The success of Mumm brought great wealth to Brunswick. The Mumm tax was a significant source of income for the city. The breweries were some of the most important buildings in town. The trade supported a whole ecosystem of related professions: coopers who made the barrels, carters who transported them, and merchants who sold them. For a time, the name Brunswick was almost synonymous with its famous dark beer, but this success also led to imitation and fraud. Less scrupulous brewers in other cities would try to pass off their own dark herbal beers as Brunswick Mumm. This is why the city's regulations and seals were so important. They were fighting to protect their brand from being diluted by cheap knockoffs. The golden age of Mumm lasted from the 15th century through the 17th century. During this time, it was a true international phenomenon. It was a testament to the power of a good product and a smart trade network. It showed that even in the late Middle Ages, it was possible to create a brand that was recognized and desired across national borders. The Mumm was more than a beer, it was a cultural and economic force, a liquid ambassador for the city of Brunswick. All good things come to an end. The reign of Brunswick Mumm as the king of strong beers could not last forever. By the 18th century, its popularity was in steep decline. By the 19th century, it had all but disappeared. Several factors contributed to the downfall of this once famous brew. It was a death by 1,000 cuts, caused by changing laws, changing tastes, and a formidable new competitor. The first and most important threat to Mumm was the hop. Hops have been used in brewing for centuries, but their use became widespread and standardized in the 15th and 16th centuries. Hops were a game changer. They had several advantages over the herbal groot mixtures that Mumm relied on. First, hops were a much better preservative. Hopped beer lasted longer and traveled better than most groot beers. While Mumm was known for its durability, hopped beers were often more stable. Second, hops provided a clean, bitter flavor that balanced the sweetness of the malt. As more people drank hop beer, their palates began to change. The complex, medicinal, and sometimes confusing flavors of Mumm started to seem old-fashioned. The clean bitterness of hops was modern and refreshing. The rise of English porters and pale ales, all heavily hopped, created a new standard for what beer should taste like. Another major blow came from within Germany itself. In 1516, the Duchy of Bavaria enacted a law that would become world-famous, the Reinheitsgebot, or the German beer purity law. This law stated that beer could only be made from 3 ingredients: water, barley, and hops. Yeast was not included. because its role was not yet understood. While this law initially only applied to Bavaria, its principles gradually spread across other German states. The Reinheitsgebot was a direct attack on the very idea of mum. Mum, with its wheat, oats, beans, and long list of herbs, was the definition of an impure beer under this new standard. As the philosophy of the purity law gained traction, mum was pushed to the margins. It came to be seen as an archaic, adulterated product. The law standardized German beer, and in that new standard, there was no place for mum. Changing tastes were also a huge factor. The world was moving into the Age of Enlightenment. The medieval belief in medicinal herbs and strange concoctions began to fade. Mum's identity was deeply tied to its status as a health tonic. As science-based medicine advanced, the idea of drinking a syrupy beer to cure your ailments seemed less and less plausible. People started to drink beer for pleasure and refreshment, not as a prescription. The thick, heavy, and medicinal character of mum was no longer an asset, it was a liability. By the late 1700s, the export market for mum had collapsed. English brewers were making their own excellent porters and stouts, and they no longer needed to import strong, dark beer from Germany. The same was true in other countries. Local brewing traditions, now mostly based on hops, had become strong enough to push out the foreign import. This production in Brunswick dwindled. The once mighty mum breweries closed down one by one. The secret recipes were lost or forgotten. By the end of the 19th century, true Brunswick mum was effectively extinct. The name mum survived for a while, sometimes used in England to refer to any strong, dark beer, but the original product was gone. Today, mum is a historical curiosity. It exists only in old texts and brewers' manuals. However, the modern craft beer movement has led to a renewed interest in historical beer styles. A handful of adventurous brewers, mostly in Germany and the United States, have attempted to recreate mum based on old recipes. These recreations are niche products made for curious beer historians and drinkers looking for a taste of something truly different. These modern versions can never be exactly the same. The grains are different, the yeasts are different, and the herbs are sourced from different places. But they offer a glimpse into that lost world of flavor. They remind us that the history of beer is much richer and stranger than we often imagine. The story of mum is a lesson in how tastes, technologies, and laws can shape what we eat and drink. It was a product perfectly suited for its time, a time of trade guilds, belief in herbal medicine, and a taste for strong, sweet flavors. But as the world changed, it was left behind. It remains a fascinating ghost, a dark, syrupy, and powerful memory from beer's forgotten past.